Everything you've been taught about manifestation is built on the wrong foundation. I'm talking about the mainstream advice, the visualization, the positive thinking, the vision boards, the act as if. All of it has the wrong foundation. The visualize more, the feel good, the raise your vibration, all of these different things that are taught in mainstream manifestation content. Because here's the thing, manifestation isn't mystical, it's mechanical. And once you understand the actual mechanism, you'll be able to see why exactly it's working for you. Because the manifestation industry is really trying to sell you a dream. It's trying to tell you to visualize, to feel good, to raise your vibration. And in order to understand how to do that, you need to know what exactly this means. And we'll go over a lot of this here later on in this video. But think positive, act as if, all of these different things here that the manifestation space teaches you without giving you real practical frameworks and methods to actually make it happen, right? What actually works is making sure your identity is in the right place, right? You've chosen the identity that you want to have that is able to attract and get you the outcomes that you want. And then your emotional OS. This is huge. This is your internal operating system for how you're managing your emotions in terms of understanding how they work, how to process them, how to make sure that they are in alignment with who you're wanting to be in terms of your identity, right? So your interpretations are also a big factor in terms of how you see the world, right? Making sure that you're seeing the world through a lens that is congruent with your identity, okay? And then your behavior signature. This is huge in terms of how you act, the actions that you take in terms of, are they congruent with your identity? Are you doing things that show the world, yourself, that you actually are who you are, right? And then ultimately here, the embodiment of your identity. And your identity is the ultimate factor here, right? All of these are components and parts of your identity, which identity you can think about as the main OS, the main operating system, okay? And so all of these are what actually work for you to be able to manifest everything that you actually want, right? Instead of trying to figure out and find out that you are doing all of these different things here, right? Which are important and they do have a place, but if you're just focusing on this here, you're going to continue to manifest, because in a sense, we're always manifesting, but we're going to continue to manifest the things that we don't want. And so this is how we're able to manifest what we actually want. Now, let me give you an example of how this actually works. So let's call this person Chris. So Chris was doing everything right. He had his vision board on point. He had his acting as if. He had the, visualization, all of these different things, right, that were necessary and that were mentioned here in terms of making sure that you can manifest what you want. So he was doing all of that. And he was very consistent with it. He had his daily gratitude journal. He was meditating. He was visualizing his goals for 5 minutes a day. And he never missed a day. I mean, it was very much so like clockwork. He was listening to all the different courses, podcasts, reading all the different books. And he was doing this for about 2 years. But here's the thing. Nothing ever happened. Nothing ever moved for him. I mean, he'd have a week or two where things were finally starting to move forward and get a little momentum. But then he would just slide right back into his old reality with the same patterns, the same ceiling, staying in the same version of himself. And every time it didn't work, he thought to himself that he needed to just do more. He would think to himself like, you know what, maybe I need a new morning routine, or maybe I need a longer morning routine. Maybe I need to do a different technique. And you see, I recognize Chris because I was Chris not too long ago. And here's what neither of us fully understood, that all of these here were applications. So let's go like this. Every single one of these, okay, applications. And they were running on something much more deeper, which was the main operating system, which is the identity, okay? This is the main operating system. This is the top layer. Think about this like Windows 11 or Apple iOS, okay? You have the main identity operating system that then has different applications running, okay? But if you don't have your identity, right, in the right type of place that you want it to be in terms of who you are and how you're showing up, then it doesn't matter what application you're running. The system's going to override it every time, right? You can try to visualize more, feel good, raise your vibration, think positive, act as if, right? All of these different things. If you don't have your main identity that essentially is running the main operating system in the right place, you're going to continue to get the same results, okay? Because your identity is a driver. And you see with Chris, he wasn't failing with manifestation. He was doing it on a foundation that couldn't support what he was building. And that's the thing that nobody tells you. And so now what I want to go over is the 6 manifestation mistakes. And this is essentially what most manifestation gets wrong. So let's go ahead and erase the board here. Okay, so what most manifestation advice gets wrong? These are 6 mistakes. Number 1, thoughts. And here's the thing with thoughts, because it's really always about make sure that you're always thinking positive, right? Thinking positive thoughts all the time, no matter what. But here's the problem. The thoughts, the positive thoughts, are not going to override your subconscious programming, right? Your subconscious identity that's already there. That's essentially the main operating system, right? Remember, you have your main operating system, which is the identity, then you have your applications. Your thoughts are like applications. And how's your application going to try to override your main operating system? Is this not going to work? So think about this. Your conscious mind generates your thoughts, and your subconscious identity generates your reality. Those are 2 different systems. And a good way to think about this is, so putting positive thoughts into a negative identity is like putting premium fuel into an engine that is not working. Because it doesn't matter what type of fuel that you put into the engine, right? Into the car, because it's not working. It's not able to function. And let's go to number 2. So number 2, emotion. And here's the thing with emotions. Emotions fluctuate, right? They go up and down, they oscillate. And your emotions are not your identity. Your identity is the one that's running in the background. It's stable. It's typically going to be somewhat of a fixed item, right? It's not always going to be exactly a fixed thing in terms of your identity, because your identity is often going through different stages, right? But you reach a level where your identity is essentially in a certain place, right? Where you see yourself a certain way. And so you have like a fixed kind of thought and vision of what your identity is, right? But your emotions, they can change by the hour, right? And when there's a conflict between how you feel in a moment and what your identity believes is true about you, your identity wins every single time. So let's go to number 3. Visualize. Now, visualize is important. I'm not saying don't visualize, but it's important for you to understand that visualization fails when your identity conflicts with your vision. Think about it this way. If you visualize financial freedom, but your identity is, I'm someone who struggles with money, then your nervous system reads that vision as a threat, not a possibility. And that pulls you back to what's safe, to what it knows. And then number 4, this is the act as if, okay? But the problem with this is that if you are doing this, but you don't truly believe that you are that identity, right? That person, then when you're doing that and you're acting, so to speak, right? Then it's going to feel fake. It's going to feel like it's not authentic, because in a sense, it really isn't, right? It's you trying to put on the show because your identity isn't at that point, at that place. And when it feels fake, your system produces resistance, which then reinforces your old identity. Let's go to 5 and 6, and both of these go together. So number 5 and number 6. Number 5 is no emotional OS. And then number 6, no behavioral alignment. Here's the thing with no emotional OS, okay? If your nervous system is running in survival mode, then your manifestations become impossible. You literally cannot access the state that is required to embody a new reality. And ultimately, what this emotional OS thing here really is an operating system for your emotions, in terms of understanding how you process your emotions, how you react to things, right? How you see the world in terms of, do you see something as a problem, as a challenge, or as an opportunity? And then how that affects your emotions, right? It's about you kind of stepping outside of yourself and looking at those patterns of how you utilize and process different events that then cause you different emotions. So that is all an operating system that you have to understand and acknowledge how it works, so that you can stop whenever you're feeling something crazy, emotional, emotional peak, emotional high, right? That fight or flight type of experience. So that's huge. And with your behavioral alignment, if your behavior doesn't match your identity, then it doesn't matter what you visualize. And the behavior is the strongest signal that your subconscious mind reads. Not your thoughts, not your vision board, but your behavior. And so ultimately, what you're doing here with these 6 mistakes is that you're trying to run a next generation reality on an operating system, OS, that was never upgraded to support it. Okay? That's essentially what it is. And so the real mechanism here for all of this, it's a pattern. And this is how it starts. Identity goes into your interpretations, okay? How you interpret the world, then into your emotions, which then drives your behavior, which then gives you your reality. And then this all goes back to your identity, okay? So this is essentially the master formula here. Your identity is then going into your interpretations in terms of how you see the world, because your identity says that I see the world in a certain way, in a positive manner. Then that drives your emotions, how you react to things, right? Your ability to keep your emotions stable and grounded. And then that goes into your behavior in terms of the actions that you take. And then this is your reality. And then this is all then reinforced back to your identity. That's the real mechanism. And real quick, I want to go into interpretations here, okay? Because this is so huge, because things happen to us and then we get an emotion, right? Somebody cuts us off, somebody calls us a bad name, somebody thinks of us in a certain way, in a negative manner, and we get frustrated, we get criticized for whatever reason, and then we take that personal, and then we get emotional, all of that. But really, the interpretation is the main component here, because this is actually going to dictate whether you have an emotion or not. Think about it. Somebody can criticize you, and if you look at it from a negative perspective, from a negative light, you're going to get emotional. And you're going to be like, man, this person said this and said that. And, maybe you take some things personal, you get frustrated, your emotions spike. Versus you look at it from a perspective of an interpretation of constructive feedback. Then you take it as, you know what, this guy has a point, or this person has a point, or I see where this person was coming from. That makes sense. Or, you know what, maybe I do need to work on A, B, and C, right? So your interpretation is what dictates your emotions. And it doesn't really matter what can be happening to you. It's about how you are seeing that event that is creating that emotional charge. And then your emotion drives your behavior. And then that behavior drives your outcomes. And then your outcomes reinforce your identity. The loop continues in infinity, right? It's infinite loop that will continue forever, right? Your identity is obviously the main component here, but everything else kind of plays into the next one. And this is essentially what your reality is, and how you see it, how you create it, and how you're able to see this, take a step back and realize, okay, how am I showing up with my identity? How am I showing up with my interpretations? How am I seeing the world? How am I reacting to things? Is it positive? Is it negative? Am I open, receptive, right? And then how is this making me behave? What actions am I taking? Am I getting the outcomes that I want? Or do I get the same old result over and over again? And so ultimately, when you understand that it's a system, then you can engineer it. Now, let me give you another story here for somebody that I'll call Marcus. So from the outside, Marcus looked like somebody who had figured it all out. He was building his business, hitting his targets, and was productive by every external measure that you can think of. People around him looked at him and kind of idolized him like, man, this guy has it all figured out. But here's what was actually running underneath all of Marcus's success and results. And I want to write this on the board. So he was running the don't lose what you have, don't fall behind. Because think about it, a lot of times we see people on social media and we see that they have a tremendous amount of success. They're super successful by external factors, right? They have a lot of views, they have a lot of different, maybe cars, external things, right? And we think to ourselves, man, this person has it really figured out, like they've got it all. But oftentimes we don't really see underneath everything. We don't really see the program and what's really kind of running underneath the surface, right? Because the external view we see is very positive. It's very, beautiful and amazing and great and all these different, amazing things that are happening and that he's doing or she's doing. But we rarely ever able to see how is this person really running their internal operating system. And with Marcus, his whole thing was don't lose what you have, don't fall behind. And so what is this? This is essentially scarcity. He was trying to hold on to something, and he had built something, and he was just trying his hardest to just not lose it. And when you have a grip on something because you don't want to let it go, then there's resistance, there's tension, there's pressure. So that's not abundance. Really, that's survival mode. And it's wearing a mask of ambition. And I recognize Marcus because I've been there before as well. And here's why this matters, because all of the results were real, right? The productivity, the assets, the views, the followers, everything was real. But the identity underneath was built on fear, which means everything that he built was built on a foundation of anxiety. Every win for him felt fragile. Every milestone felt like borrowed time, because the OS, the operating system that was running the manifestation, was scarcity, not expansion. And here's the thing. Your reality is always going to match your identity, not your desires, not your effort, not what you think, but your identity. And so when you have a fear-based identity, okay, Then you have fear-based manifestations. Okay. You may get some things done. You may accomplish some things in terms of getting some outcomes, but it's going to be built on a very unstable foundation where at any single moment, everything can fall apart. Just think about like concrete. When concrete is poured, there's a rebar, like metal rods that go into the initial laying of the foundation, and then concrete is poured over that so that it can reinforce that structure, that foundation. But if it's not there, then it's going to be a very shaky foundation. So that's why it's important to have your foundation based off of not fear, but abundance, expansion. Because with this, you know that there's always going to be more. If something happens, it is what it is. I'll figure it out. Right? But if you are kind of like clenching to everything that you're doing, then you're not going to be able to have that foundation that is needed to continue long-term success. And this is the part that nobody teaches. You could be working hard, doing all the right things, producing results, and still be manifesting from the wrong frequency, because it's not about what is the output. It's about what is generating that output. Okay, so now what I want to go over is the 3 hidden blocks of your manifestation. So let me go ahead and erase the board here. So the 3 hidden blocks. So the 3 hidden blocks are: number 1, identity conflict. Number 2, emotional resistance. Number 3, behavioral incoherence. So let's go over each one of these individually. So with the identity conflict, you essentially want a big reality, but you're operating from a small identity. You see, the system is working exactly as it's designed. It's just designed for a different version of you, because you cannot receive what your identity isn't configured to hold. You want to be a successful entrepreneur. You want to do big things. You want to have impact. You want to do all these different things, but your identity is in direct conflict of that. Like, you don't see yourself as that person really deep down, right? Maybe you're visualizing it. Maybe you're trying to act as if, but if your identity isn't in the right place, then it's going to be just friction, and it's going to be in direct conflict of what you actually are portraying to the world. And then with your emotional resistance, right? Think about this. Like, your emotional OS, your operating system, your nervous system, all of these are trained for survival. Remember, it's all just a system. It's all just something that is running, and it's happening, and at any given moment you can change it, but first you need to be aware of it. And so this is where we are bringing the awareness to it in terms of understanding that it's a system, so that we can change it. Because when you're trying to manifest something really large, right, something bigger than normal, your nervous system is reading it as unknown, as danger, as like uncertainty. And so what is it going to naturally do? Try to protect you and bring you back to the status quo. Just think about it this way. Just think about like you going and you're on a freeway and you're like headed to your, destination through your visualization. And then all of a sudden have your nervous system step in, and then like it's pulling the e-brake, right? In the middle of the freeway. It's like, whoa, what's going on here? Something is wrong. We're going in the wrong direction here. Let's stop. Let's think about what we're doing here. And let's really just kind of contemplate it and think about it. And this was the problem for Marcus, right? His productivity was real. His results were real, but the nervous system that was running underneath was in a constant low-level threat state. And he couldn't expand to something bigger of what he truly ultimately wanted because the system was optimized to protect what he already had, right? The status quo. And then the last one here, number 3, behavioral incoherence. Think about this. If your actions don't match your desired identity, then you're going to just continue to get the same old results because your subconscious mind doesn't really listen to what you say. I mean, yes, you can do different meditative practices and you can essentially reprogram your subconscious through like hypnosis and things like that. But for the most part, your subconscious is really listening to and watching what you do, right? The action that you take, because that reinforces who you are. If you're constantly saying that I'm wealthy, I'm a successful entrepreneur, but your actions say otherwise, and your actions are of someone who avoids making business decisions or financial decisions and risks and bets on yourself, then you're going to continue to stay in the same place because your old program is going to keep running on autopilot. And the way that I want you to think about this, all 3 of these, okay? Let's look at this here. You can't download a massive file on a slow, unstable signal. Think about this. This is like you trying to download a massive file on your computer, but your internet signal is low. You don't have enough speed, and so it takes you what would normally take, nice stable internet speed, maybe 5 seconds, right? 10 seconds. But maybe it takes you days because you don't have, it's like, think about like the dial-up, right? Time frame where back in the day when the internet first came out, you had to dial in with the modem and your internet speed was super slow, right? Like you couldn't use your phone. So this is how I want you to think about it, right? You are trying to download a massive file on a slow, unstable signal. By the way, if any of this is resonating with you and you want to work with me one-on-one to help update your internal operating system so that you can become the best version of yourself, fill out the application below and we'll see if we're a good fit. Okay, so now what I want to go over is my framework that I've developed, which is the OS method. And this is what actually works for manifesting whatever it is that you want. So let's go ahead and erase the board here. Okay, so the OS method this is what actually works. This is 5 steps, okay? So let's go over them. Number 1, you want to recode identity. Because with recoding identity, you have to shift who you are, who you believe you are, before you can shift your reality. This is the foundation. I've said this before, right? This is like your main operating system, your root source code. And if you don't have this at the forefront as a foundation, then it doesn't matter what you're ultimately doing. You're not going to get the results and the outcome that you want, or it's not going to be long term. You may have a little bit of success, but you're going to fall back into different things, right? Different instances, different things that happen, and then you're going to go fall back to your identity. And what used to be where the identity code was running something that said, I'm somebody who always struggles now becomes I'm someone who adapts and creates. And I want you to really understand this. This is not like an affirmation. This is a system level update. Your identity shifts, your interpretation shifts, and your behavior shifts, and then your reality ultimately shifts into what you actually want. And I want to show you how this actually looks like. So let me give you an example. You have two different people, person A and person B. Okay, same starting point, same framework, completely different outcomes. So let's start with person A. So person A watches this video and they learn all the different frameworks, the methods, the things that they should avoid, the things that are important in terms of your identity being the main component, right? They learn everything intellectually. It clicks, like they get it, right? They understand it. They understand the loops, the system. They understand why their previous approach didn't work and what they need to do to make it work, right? So they're motivated and they feel ready to make a change. But here's the thing. They go back to their life and they continue to do the same old things day in and day out. Because understanding a concept is not the same as recoding an identity. Because for that person A, that same old system is still running. Then 90 days later passes, right? And they're still in the same old place, the same ceiling. And now they really feel frustrated because they thought that they found the solution, right? Like the answer to their problems. And that's the same thing for a lot of different people, right? Where they consume. They learn all these different things. They have a wealth of knowledge, information, but they don't put it to use, don't put it to action. So let's contrast this and look at now with person B. And with person B, they learn the framework, right? But instead of just understanding it, they make a declaration where they say, I'm someone who builds and creates from abundance, not from fear. And then to reinforce that, they take one small identity-based action every single day. They don't do a bunch of stuff. They just do it once per day to make sure that that action is in alignment with that new identity. It's like one of those things where one little small action that future self, right, that new identity would do themselves, right? In the first week, it feels super uncomfortable. In the second week, it feels unfamiliar. And by the third week, something has shifted. Not in the external world yet, but something has shifted inside. The way that they interpret events has changed. Their emotional signature has changed. 90 days later, the reality is starting to match. So it's the same knowledge, different identity work, which then created a different reality. You see, the difference between person A and person B isn't intelligence. It's not effort. It's not even belief. It's whether or not they did the system level work that is required. And then number two, this is where we regulate emotional OS. Because here's the thing, if your nervous system is in survival mode, you're not going to be able to manifest, or you're going to manifest things that you don't want, right? The opposite of abundance, of expansion, right? And the way that I want you to think about this is, back in the day, I think it was like the early 80s and 90s, maybe even into the early 2000s, there used to be these TVs where in order to pick up signals, you had to get like antennas, okay? And, you know, sometimes you had to go and you had to like move the antenna in a certain way and put it in a certain position to actually receive the signal. So think about that in terms of like the antenna being your emotional OS, right? Like if your antenna is constantly kind of shaky and not able to be stable, then it won't be able to receive that clear signal. So before anything else, you need to regulate the emotional operating system. Now, one of the ways that I like to do this, anytime where, like, I don't really do this anymore because I've programmed myself to not really react to a lot of different things. But what I really like to do before, and I still do from time to time just for different reasons, but one of the things I like to do here is use breath work. Okay. So if you catch yourself really feeling down and out or like an emotional spike, take 3 to 5 different deep breaths. Okay. Now, you're holding for 3 to 5, and then you're releasing for 3 to 5. And what this does is it immediately calms your nervous system. It calms you down, and you're able to be more level-headed, okay? And so anytime that you feel that you are in an emotional spike, utilize the breath work. It's going to help out tremendously. And then number 3, this is where we are rewiring interpretations, okay? In terms of how you're seeing events, how you're seeing experiences. Because ultimately, we're all just meaning-making machines. And the meanings that you attach to the events, the experiences, the things that are happening in your life are what are going to drive your emotions, okay? So interpretations factor into your emotions. And if you see everything as a threat, as a problem, as somebody attacking you as you play in the victim mode, right? Then you're going to consistently have these emotional spikes. So you need to be able to interpret things from a very level headset. Instead of something being a massive, huge deal, let it be neutral, okay? Or if something happens, right, and you have to feel that emotion because it's natural, right? Like I go through things and I feel emotions, but I tend to catch myself, right? Like it's okay to feel the emotions. You're supposed to feel like uneasiness and like frustration, but catch yourself, like feel it. Like, man, what can I do here? Like, what can actually be done right here, right now that will allow me to change this? If there's nothing I can do, then why continue to feel that emotion? Like, it is what it is, right? So, kind of like it is what it is, okay? Because oftentimes you're feeling emotions and you're letting things get to you because it's more often the fact that you are thinking about that thing, right? Like your thoughts about an event and experience are what are actually causing you more stress, more issues, more problems than the actual event itself. And then number 4, this is the reinforcing, okay, behavior. Remember, your behavior is what essentially is telling your subconscious that this is real. This is actually what it is, right? Because you can continue to try to tell yourself and say things to yourself about like, I'm this, I'm that. And there's a part of that, right? That's important, but your behavior needs to match that identity. And the way that you can do this is take small actions, micro actions every single day so that they can compound, right? And they can build up over time. Because if you try to change something like super fast, like think about it this way. Like, let's say you want to get up early in the morning, okay? And if you go from like getting up from like, let's say 9 a.m. and you go down to like 5 a.m. and you're like, I'm going to get up at 5 a.m. every single day. That's a huge, huge deal, right? Like that's a massive shift. So instead of making it where it's 5 a.m., maybe try 8 a.m. You know, go with that for a couple weeks, then go to 7, then go to 6, right? Work your way there. You don't want to create a massive shock to the system, or else it's going to always resist that change. And then number 5, reality conversions. This is where everything comes together. When your identity, when your emotions, when your interpretations, and your behavior is all aligned, your outcomes don't feel forced. They feel inevitable. This is where your manifestations in terms of what you want become gravitational. So like you are essentially a magnet, okay? Let's draw like a little magnet like this, okay? And try to make this a little bit better, okay? Like this. Let me fix this right here. So like this. Okay, so here's a magnet, and then it's like pulling, right? And this is your reality, okay? Your desired reality. It's pulling all that in. It's this huge force, almost like a black hole. It's sucking all this stuff in. Your desired reality, it's all going in here, okay? And all of this here, and this here specifically, this is allowing everything to converge together. And it's a massive pull, gravitational pull that is pulling in your desired reality. And so ultimately, you don't manifest what you want. You manifest what your operating system allows. Chris had the right desires. Marcus had the right results, but neither of them had the right operating system running underneath. That's the work. Not more visualization, not better affirmations. The actual system upgrade. Upgrade the OS, and the manifestation upgrades automatically. You don't need more secrets. You need a better system.